Hi, I'm Abolore. Today's lesson is about how we can dissect Nigeria economy with the help of production possibility curve. A lot of Nigerians don't seem to understand how Nigeria economy works. So in today's lesson, I'll be digging it down on how well you can best understand Nigeria economy with the help of PPC, which is production possibility curve. So as usual, let's begin the class with our new words, which is usually our vocabulary for each lesson. So I have capital goods. Capital goods are already produced goods that are used to produce other valuable goods and services over time. Examples of capital goods, we have roads, factories, buildings, power plants. So the production of capital goods tend to expand the productive capacity of an economy. And expenditure on capital goods are called capital expenditure. Now, one thing you also need to know about capital goods is capital does not necessarily have to be tangible, that is what you can see and touch, like roads, factories, and all that. When you invest heavily in yourself, in terms of skills development, training acquisition, getting an education, you're investing in yourself. We call that human capital development. And that's knowledge, that's training, that's education that you've acquired will continue to exist and yield future benefits to you for years to come. So, when capital is intangible, we call it human capital development. But when capital is something you can see and touch, like roads, we call that capital goods, like roads, factories, and all that. Consumer goods. Consumer goods are goods of consumption expenditure, and they give immediate satisfaction. The moment you consume them, you get satisfaction. That's consumer goods. And examples, we have food, we have clothing, we have food, we have recurrent expenditure such as salaries, wages, allowances, and all that. Now, in short, capital goods are used to produce consumer goods. And that explains if you want more consumer goods, you should produce more of capital goods. For example, you want more foods, you want more clothing, you should build more manufacturing plants, and so on and so forth. So that's with respect to the vocabulary for today's lesson. So let's talk about the topic for today. Production possibility curve. A curve showing combination of quantities of goods and services an economy can produce when existing resources are used fully and efficiently. So production possibility curve is a graph showing combinations of goods and services a country can produce given the level of technology and full utilization of its resources. Now, we have production possibility curve here. And this production possibility curve we have here is drawn on various assumptions. And I'll be giving you about 5. 1. Production possibility curve is drawn on the fact that only 2 goods can be produced and in different proportions. So in this case, we've chosen to produce capital goods and consumer goods. Number 2. The same resources can be used to produce the 2 goods and can be shifted freely between the 2 goods. The same resources that is used to produce capital goods can as well be used to produce consumer goods and can be shifted freely between the 2 goods. Number 3, the time period is short. Number 4, resources are used efficiently. And number 5, production techniques are given and constant. So, having taken those assumptions on which production possibility curve is drawn, let's dissect Nigeria economy as well as other economy using production possibility curve. Now, just a quick one. The explanation of production possibility curve will be given in three phases, or is in three phases. First, combination inside the curve. That's the first stage. The second stage, combinations on the curve, such as combination C, Z, Y, F, and combination A. And combination outside the curve, which is combination B. So let's start off with combination inside the curve, which is combination D. At combination D, the country is able to produce 20 billion of capital goods and 40 billion of consumer goods. Combinations inside the curve explains that the society is not using its existing resources fully, and that means underutilization of resources. So, if 5 workers are used, when 2 workers will be enough? For example, Nigerian governments, talking about the presidents, the governors, the senators, there are usually a lot of convoys that follow them. So that's a waste of resources. That's inefficient use of resources. Also, let's take the standard working hour per week to be 40. If the labor force or the workforce are working 20 hours per week, that's under unemployment of resources. That's underutilization of resources. That's inefficient use of resources. And we say resources are lying idle. Now, also, one thing you need to understand about points inside the curve is it indicates that the country is in recession, because in a period of recession, there is usually unemployment of labor, and unemployment of labor means unemployment of capital, which are used by labor in the production of goods and services. So points inside the curve also means unemployment of resources, or the economy is in recession. Because when a country is in recession, productivity level is not usually at full capacity. The country will work below capacity level. So that's with respect to points or combination inside the curve, such as points D. Now, a country could move from points D, that means being inside the curve, to being on the curve. And that means the country will be having more of capital goods as well as consumer goods. Take for instance, at point D, the country is producing 20 billion and 40 billion. Then when a country moves from point D to point F, then the country has increased the productivity level of capital goods from 20 to 30 and consumer goods from 40 to 55. And what you have in that regard is an outward shift in the production possibility curve. And this is what you're going to be having from D to F, because the increase in consumer goods is more than the increase in capital goods, which is 10. Increase in capital goods 20 to 30, which is 10 billion, and increase in consumer goods from 40 to 55. Then you're going to be having a larger increase in capital goods by 15 billion and capital goods by 10 billion. So that increase has led to an outward shift in the production possibility curve. And when the PPC shifts outward, we call it economic growth. So economic growth simply means an increase in the level of productivity or output. So that's with respect to points inside the curve. So points on the curve, which is the second stage of the production possibility curve. Points on the curve means efficiency, efficient utilization of resources. Now, not all points on the curve indicate efficiency. For instance, point C and point A does not indicate efficiency, because at point C, the country is only able to produce capital goods and no consumer goods. Also at point A, the country is only able to produce consumer goods and no capital goods. And also, that doesn't follow the assumptions of production possibility curve, which explains that the two goods must be produced in certain proportion. So, points Z, Y, and F are points of efficiency because at point Z, Y, and F, the country is able to produce certain proportion of capital goods as well as certain proportion of consumer goods. So at point Z, the country is able to produce 75 billion of capital goods and 25 billion of consumer goods. Also at point Y, the country is able to produce 60 billion of capital goods and 40 billion of consumer goods. And at point F, the country is able to produce 40 billion of capital goods and 55 billion of consumer goods. Now, every country of the world that was, let's say, in the short run means at the beginning, every country's point was once inside the curve, including the developed economies that we have nowadays. So let's assume Nigeria was once inside the curve. That means its resources are not being efficiently utilized, inefficient use of resources. Now, Nigeria moved from point D to point F. Why Nigeria at point F? Because Nigeria being a developing economy means larger proportion of its income is spent on consumer goods. That's consumption expenditure. So here, Nigeria produces 55 billion of consumer goods and 40 billion of capital goods. United States is a developed economy, and developed economy spends larger proportion of its income on capital goods than on consumer goods. So US is here. US produces 60 billion of capital goods and 40 billion of consumer goods. Who can guess which country is here? Japan. Japan produces more of capital goods than consumer goods. They spend larger proportion of its, income on capital goods than on consumer goods. So Japan is it. Now, just a quick one with respect to this slope. This slope is concave, and concave means it has a negative slope, and it's increasing this way. It has a negative slope, and it's increasing this way. This slope is called marginal rate of transformation, and it explains the rate at which a commodity could be substituted for another. This slope explains the concept of opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of producing more of capital goods is less of consumer goods, or the opportunity cost of producing more of consumer goods is less of capital goods. That means for an economy to produce more of capital goods, resources have to be withdrawn from consumer goods and used in the production of capital goods. That explains the concept of opportunity cost, and that's trade-off. And just like Samuelson says, substitution is the law of life in a developed economy, meaning that if you want to produce more of capital goods, you have to sacrifice, you have to withdraw resources from consumer goods in order for you to be able to produce capital goods, and vice versa. So that's with respect to points on the curve. So points on the curve means efficiency. And this efficiency could be as a result of the economy is able to obtain more resources, the economy is able to increase the efficiency of its existing resources, the economy is able to increase the work hour per week of its labor force, the country is able to reduce surplus capacity, and so on and so forth. And when that happens, when there is efficiency of resources, then what happens is the PPC will shift outward. And that outward in the production possibility curve explains the concept of economy growth. And economy growth simply means an increase in the level of output, productivity level. And the last stage, which is combination outside the curve, combination B. It means the country will be able to produce 100 billion of capital goods and 60 billion of consumer goods. Combination outside the curve means production is not feasible, production is not practicable, workable, and unattainable. Now, this point outside the curve explains the concept of scarcity, meaning that every society faces limits. You can't produce everything because resources are limited. However, if the economy obtains more resources, increase the efficiency of its existing resources, both quality and quantity, invest heavily in research and development, inventions and innovations, technological changes, then such an economy will be able to produce it. So only economy that its economy is driven heavily by research and development will be able to produce it. And this is what you're going to be having. Outward shift in the production possibility curve, because economic growth and development being a continuous thing, the more an economy is driven by local contents, research and development, the more its production possibility curve will shift outward. If an economy is able to replace its old capital goods with new and modern ones, then its PPC will shift outward. Nigerian economy. Nigerian government should try as much as possible to replace its old roads with new and modern ones. Advanced roads this 21st century, so that there will be easy movement of transfer of goods from one place to another. Production will increase, consumption will increase, distribution will increase, exchange will increase, and all that. So points outside the curve means production is not feasible, production is not workable, production is not workable here, production is not practicable, and production is unobtainable. However, if the economy is driven heavily by research and development, invention and innovation, technological changes, the economy replacing its old capital goods with new and modern ones, then the country will be able to produce it. So Japan can still be here because Japan economy is driven heavily by research and development. United States, Germany, France, Netherlands, and all that. Those are kind of countries that can produce at this point. So Nigeria too can produce at this point only if the economy can be driven by local contents. So that's with respect to the explanation with respect to production possibility curve. So in furtherance to juxtaposing the importance of producing capital goods and consumer goods, I have two graphs here. PPC of developing nations and PPC of developed nations. PPC of developing nations. The developing nations are also called middle income economies. Nigeria is a middle income economy. I think it's lower middle income economy. So middle income economies spend larger proportion of their income on consumption. That's consumer goods. So that's why you have their PPC to be close to x-axis here. They produce more of consumer goods. And because they produce more of consumer goods, the PPC of developing nation will shift outward by small amounts because they produce more of consumer goods. So their PPC will shift out by small amounts and not by large amounts. Also, or in contrary, which developed nations are advanced, wealthiest, rich, industrial nations. So the they produce more of capital goods than consumer goods. That's why their PPC is towards the y-axis here. So, like I said earlier, PPC, production of capital goods, the production of more capital goods tend to expand the productive capacity of an economy. So, when a country concentrates on producing more capital goods, then such an economy will have more of consumer goods. In fact, we have more of both kind of goods in future. So what we have is, as a result of the production of more capital goods, the PPC will shift out. The result of this is the PPC will shift out larger. But because the country produces consumer goods, the PPC will shift out larger by small amount. Just like you want to compare a middle income individual with a rich person or a rich individual. Rich individual invests, and the return on investment is very high when compared to low income individual that only save. The return on saving is very low when compared to return on investments. So that's with respect to the PPC of developing nations as well as developed nations. And lastly, before I drop off this conversation, I want to quickly do a wrap up on the uses and applications of PPC. Number one uses of PPC is it helps to explain the concept of economic growth. Economic growth means, or when there is efficiency of resources, there will be economic growth. When there is efficiency of resources in terms of an economy is able to cut down surplus capacity, waste, mismanagement, increasing the working hour per week, then what you have is increase in productivity level. And when there is increase in the productivity level, the PPC will shift outward. And when PPC shifts outward, we call that economic growth. And when there is economic growth, there will be increase in the production of both capital goods as well as consumer goods. But economic growth could be partial. Partial in the sense that you can experience increase in production of capital goods and no increase in the production of consumer goods. Take a look at this. Capital goods, consumer goods. This is initial PPC, and you have something like this. In this case, it is called partial economic growth because there is an increase in the production of capital goods, but no increase in consumer goods. So this is partial economic growth. But what you have is complete economic growth, but is ascribed to be the growth of a developing nation, because developing nations, they produce more of consumer goods than capital goods. But the economic growth of a developed nation will look like this. Will look like this. In fact, we have something like this. You have initial PPC. You now have larger proportion of PPC than consumer goods. So for developed nation like United States, they produce more of capital goods than consumer goods. But the advice is if a country wants more of consumer goods, it should produce more of capital goods, because capital goods are used to produce consumer goods. That's the number one uses. Economic growth. Number two, it helps to explain the concept of under-unemployment of resources. Under-unemployment of resources, if your combination is concentrated inside the curve, it means under-unemployment of resources. It means resources are lying idle. It means inefficient use of resources. So any combination or any point inside the curve, it means under unemployment of resources. And also, it helps to explain the concept of technical progress. Technical progress means an economy is able to get more output from the same inputs. Inputs are raw materials, factors of production that you put into production process. Output is the result. So when a country is able to get more output from the same input, we call it technical progress. So technical progress in terms of there is increase in supervision, there is increase in the work hour per week. There is cut in waste and mismanagement. There is cut in surplus capacity, and so on and so forth. Then in such an economy, we experience technical progress, which means the ability of an economy to get more output from the same inputs. And lastly, it helps to explain the difference between present goods and future goods. Present goods are also called consumer goods, while future goods are also called capital goods. So, present goods give immediate satisfaction. Future goods give both immediate and future satisfaction. So, if an economy desires faster economic growth, such an economy is advised to invest heavily in the production of capital goods, because if an economy invests in capital goods now, it will have more of consumer goods and capital goods in future, unlike present goods that only give immediate satisfaction. And present goods or consumer goods or consumption expenditure like payment of huge salaries, allowances like Nigerian government does. If Nigeria truly desires faster economic growth, then there has to be a cut in salaries of these public office holders. Allowances, it has to be cut. Then such should be divested into the production of more capital goods like modern roads, modern bridges, modern railways, modern dams, and all that. Then Nigeria will experience faster economic growth as an economy. So those are basically the uses and application of production possibility curve. So at this juncture, I think that's a wrap up on today's lesson. I want to thank you all for your time. It's been a moment with you. I think I've had fun so far, and I think you all do as well. So if you did like this video, please, I'm begging you, push the like button. And if it happens to be that this is the first time you're watching my video, please click the subscribe button, ding the bell, ding the subscribe bell, and each time I have a new video come out, that will come straight directly to your smartphones, to your laptops, to your desktops, and what have you. So it's been a moment. It's with you guys once more. Thank you all. I'll see you on my next video. Do have a good one. Bye-bye.